Hello all, I am commentator, editor, admin, well, whatever you want to talk about, of RPL, Ryan Searles. You know me mainly from commentating, but also being involved heavily with the race highlights and the editing parts of the YouTube and narrator of the only RPL documentary. Let's get over things quickly and tell you what we're talking about today. We're talking about the Season 12 Tier 2 and Season 2 Formula Endurance preview, and we're going to give some predictions with it. Last season, we did this very much differently. We went through tons of things. I did this with my co-commentator for Tier 1, RPL Titan Iron, and we went through best driver pairing, worst driver pairing, who we thought the champions would be, bold prediction, simple prediction, you name it. There was tons of things to go over from last season with Tier 2 and, well, it would have been F2, but it was Formula Endurance, and we didn't even know it was going to be a tier at the time until the next week later. We went over things for Formula 1, Tier 1, and we'll go over some things for that too in a little bit. But that will come toward the end. In the meantime, we should get going with this. The RPL Tier 2 calendar for Season 12. Let's talk about it. There is 11 races that makes up the season. This is the way it's been for the last couple of seasons, except for last season. Last season had 13 races for Tier 2. This one has 12, or not 12, 11. 2 less, I meant to say. So, round number 1, this Friday, tomorrow, as of talking about this, is Silverstone. It's the first season opener in Tier 2. That is Britain since Season 6 Tier 2, and first in RPL as a whole since Formula Endurance last season, funny enough. Austria is round 2. Very familiar with that track for Tier 2. 2 of the last 3 seasons. France is round number 3. Monza is round number 4. So we're continuing the streak of keeping an Italian track on the RPL Tier 2 calendar. For most of this game cycle, we had Italy and Imola in Season 9. Season 10, I don't think we had either, but I could be wrong. Season 11, we had Imola last season, and now this season it's only Italy and Monza. So we get out of the European stretch after round number 4, and we go to Texas for a second straight season, Canada for a second straight season, and then we return to Mexico. Tadpole will be happy with that because he's wanted Mexico on the calendar, and it's on the calendar for Formula Endurance and Formula 1 Tier 2. So there's a little preview for there before the Formula Endurance calendar is spoken about. So our next 4 tracks will consist of the Asian side stretch. With the other side of the world, we go from the European stretch to the US stretch to this kind of stretch where we have the final 4 rounds consisting in Bahrain in round number 8. Abu Dhabi returns for the first time since Season 7. And that's the 9th round. The penultimate round is China. That returns to the RPL Tier 2 calendar for the first time since Season 8. We also have Japan as the finale. First time as the finale in Tier 2. It was the finale for Season 1 Formula Endurance. And you know what? That's probably a good thing that we're doing it again, because it is such a nice circuit to race around. The Season 12 Tier 2 season ends on May 24th. And just for reference, for those of you wondering, Round 1, Round 2, Round 3 will all be split between a 4 to 5 hour difference rather than a 5 to 6 hour difference between the US and the UK drivers. Well, US, European drivers, whatever you want to talk about. US, UK, US, European. 4 to 5 hour, 5 to 6 hour difference for the first 3 rounds rather than a 5 to 6 hour difference. No track is on the RPL calendar in Tier 2 for 4 times in a row. Our 4 seasons of F1 23 consists of Season 9, Season 10, 11, and now 12 on the game cycle. As for the lineups, let's go over that quickly now. We're 5 minutes into the video/stream, so we should get going with this very quickly. I will continue with this. The Tier 2 lineup. The only vacant seat is in Red Bull. Bonkers 5 is the Red Bull driver that's full-time. In Ferrari, we've got JNT Gaming and ERS Ardell, our Tier 2 Canadian driver. In Mercedes, we've got JTK and Joe Wilson returning. Alpine have a very interesting lineup, a driver lineup that can actually consist of a lot of podiums, I feel, and be similar to the way they ran in Season 9. We got Tadpole and Kippu. McLaren consists of Hunted and Valkyrie. Hunted, the champion from Season 10. Tadpole, the champion from Season 7, I believe. Alfa Romeo consists of Bino and RSF1 Invade. Wavy is at Aston Martin alongside our second female RPL driver, Mintoki. Something I was not aware of up until last week. We got Valk and Wavy, or not Valk, Wavy, Valk and Mintoki, the two female drivers in RPL, both in 2 full-time seats in Tier 2. Haas consists of Zomans and BRT Dom. BRT Dom racing in Formula Endurance already. Once having a race victory, I believe. If not, a podium, I believe it was, at Hungary. So yeah, we shall see how he does full-time. And in Tier 2 this time. AlphaTauri consists of Redfire Tiger and Blue Gagi. Williams has, rounding out the grid, Zatsi and El Mythic. So let's go over my predictions and opinions now for the upcoming Tier 2 season. I am going to talk about the best pairing on the grid, and I'm going to tell you right now who I think it is. I have to say, this is a really tough one, for being honest with you, but I'm actually going to give it a 50-50 split between 2 teams here. And these 2 teams should be no surprise. One of them is on my screen, and then one of them is about to be switched to my screen. Mercedes and Alpine are the 2 with the best driver pairing. It's hard to give it. I give it a split because I just don't know enough about Joe Wilson, but I know enough about the Alpine lineup of Tadpole and Kippu. With JTK and Joe Wilson, the interesting thing is that Joe Wilson returned to the podium in Las Vegas, and he has 3 RPL podiums and a race win. JTK has been really hot as of recent. He's been on fire. And he deserves a lot of credit with that being said. He showed a lot of pace when he was in that Mercedes car in Austria. And when he's been in Mercedes-powered cars as of recent, the Williams in Saudi Arabia, coming short of a podium too. Owen was the one on podium. As for Alpine's lineup, it's very easy to talk about the good things about them because Tadpole is a champion of RPL in Tier 2. And this car, he strives in really, really well. A podium last season in it. A race win in a McLaren. The Academy teammate car. Also, a podium in the last 3 seasons in this car is really good considering where this car really is at. As for Kippu, if Kippu's in the Red Bull, he's underperformed. If he's in the AlphaTauri, he's overperformed. But now, you need to give him a good midfield car in order for him to strive and get onto the podium, surprisingly. And he's had a lot of P4 and P5 finishes in RPL, but he's never had a podium in the F1 cars. So now might be his chance to do just that. And he actually had a really good performance at Formula Endurance in Japan with a P5 finish. So maybe that first podium will come this season for Kippu. But best pairing, Merc or Alpine, I give it a 50-50 split. As for the worst pairing, well, you guys are going to have to prove me wrong, AlphaTauri, once again. You got Blue Gagi and you got Redfire Tiger. Blue Gagi has seen improvement in terms of his pace. There's times where he's consistent. And there's times where he's inconsistent. He was running in a podium spot in Canada before crashing under the safety car. He probably would have not finished on the podium in that race, but he probably would have finished down in P7, P8. That's where Zatsi and Grogers finished. The penalty points continue to rack up for Blue Gagi. A race ban the last time in Season 11. So not much improvement in terms of the penalty points, but not as many big incidents that this guy has had. So there's some improvement there. But now with two less races, surely there's a chance for him to have more pace and actually have more stability being in this AlphaTauri for a 2nd straight season. Also with the fact that, well, what chance do you have to rack up penalty points when there's 2 less races? That's a good point to make. Ferrari are getting overlooked in my opinion from what someone has said in the chat, but the thing is that you can have really good pace and not some great strategy, though. And I see two drivers who do not have great strategy in that Ferrari, if I'm being honest. But no, in terms of our worst pairing, AlphaTauri, I also say because of Red Fire Tiger. I was just looking at the Twitch chat because this event's being streamed. But Red Fire Tiger is part of that worst driver pairing because he's been demoted from Tier 1 to Tier 2. Now, in the races he did do in Tier 2 last season, he did show really great pace. But the problem is, Red Fire Tiger was racking up so many incidents. 2 with Beatnik. There was another one at turn 3 in that same corner that he collided with in Beatnik in Austria that you just rack up throughout time, and it's really silly incidents, and it shows really poor racecraft. Poor ERS management he had, but really great pace. If there's anyone who can outperform this car and get it to the points and maybe get them a podium finish again like Sam Steed did in Season 9, well, it's going to be Red Fire Tiger. But the fact is, you can have really great pace to do that, but when you have little to no racecraft and getting a lot of incidents, that's going to be a concern. So hopefully I am wrong with this prediction and they prove me wrong. AlphaTauri worst driver pairing. In terms of our champions, it's really tough to tell for the constructors' sake because of the fact that Red Bull do not have a complete lineup. But I really think for the constructors, it's going to be between Red Bull and Ferrari. I don't see any way that Ferrari end up not being in this fight once again. They were last season. Ardell is a really good driver, but he's got to get better with his strategy. JNT is a really good driver too. Got to get better with his consistency. If that does happen, Ferrari will be the Constructors' champions. But if not, even with them trying to get a second driver, I still think Red Bull would be the Constructors' champions if Ferrari makes so many mistakes. But we saw last season Bonkers made a lot of mistakes, and that was his big key issue. So, I don't know. I think Constructors champions, I'm going to go with Ferrari. Drivers champion, I'm going to go with Bonkers. So, we now transition over to our Formula Endurance lineup and calendar. First, our calendar we'll go over in just 5 seconds. Let me get a sip of water so you can have me do this to the best of my ability. So, round number 1 for Formula Endurance this weekend is in Bahrain. That's the first time as the season opener in RPL since Season 10 F1. Not too long ago, but still feels like forever ago considering it's about 14 weeks ago. First time as season opener for Formula Endurance. As for round number 2, it's the first time we're running Australia in this tier. Britain returns, but this time not as a season opener, and this time it will be the first time since daylight savings time for our Europeans in RPL. The US drivers have already had their daylight savings time, but it means things are switched back to a 5 to 6 hour difference at round number 3 for Formula Endurance in difference compared to round number 3 for Tier 2. With that being said, Silverstone, round 3, March 31st. Then we go to France, which has not been ran for Formula Endurance. Neither has Austria the next round at round number 5. Portugal is there for round number 6 as well. That was ran last season, and that was a wet event in the rain. Singapore, round number 7. That's not been ran for Formula Endurance yet either. Hungary has. That's round 8 this time. Spa has not. That's round 9. Round number 10 is Mexico. Mexico has also not been ran for Formula Endurance yet. And the season finale for the first time in an RPL tier since Season 9, Tier 2, it is Texas. Now, this was a really great race last season. It was a very strategic one at that, too. So this being the finale on Jack's part is a really, really good move. Because if we have a championship, whether it be the constructors or the drivers, I feel like Texas is a great track to overtake others at. So we should see a lot of really good opportunities for that to be done. In terms of our Formula Endurance lineup, it's very hard to choose a best pairing and a worst pairing, but we'll tell you why that is now. Here's our lineup for the tier. Similar to F2, in terms of previous seasons, I will say, things look like for Formula Endurance, it is a lot of reserves, not as many full-time drivers. Show up within the last 12 hours before the race and get that done. In terms of other tiers, things usually get decided 90% of the time before the day of the race. Whereas Formula Endurance feels like a lot of these guys showing up ends up being the day of the race or the last hour. Which is okay as long as you're a reserve of the team, but you don't want to have to serve a qualifying ban due to being put on the lineups within the last 15 minutes. So we got full-time for Red Bull, only HSR Gecko. We got Ferrari, only Viorellano. And in terms of Mercedes, they filled things up. We got AMS Egg for them full-time. Instead of being at the Ferrari Academy this time, I think it's fair for him to go full-time. But he's alongside Owen, who finished P3 in the championship just last season. Full-time for Alpine is a very interesting lineup because these are two drivers who could really work on things in this tier, and this could really help with it being 100%. Kipu and Valkyrie, full-time. We have, for McLaren, Jack Miles and Hunted LAX. This is my prediction for the Constructors' Championship, but I'll get into that later and tell you why. One driver for Alfa Romeo, Aston Martin, and Haas. Let me actually go through the cars now instead of getting sidetracked here. Alistair at Alfa Romeo, Josh Hughes at Aston Martin, and GSR Virid returning for a second season, this time a full season at Haas. AlphaTauri have an interesting lineup. We've got two Americans. It's Scyther and Beatnik. Beatnik, this is the only tier he can race. I don't know if this is actually still with him full-time in the AlphaTauri when he dropped everything completely or not, but it still shows him at AlphaTauri alongside Scyther, so very interesting that this is the case. And at Williams, we've got El Mythic. So let me give you my my predictions then, and thoughts in the season in terms of who's best at what and who's not. We got the best driver pairing being listed as McLaren, and it's Hunted and Jack. I'll tell you why with Hunted. A podium here in Spain is why. A Tier 2 championship is why. And a Tier 2 pole with this car is also why. So Hunted being part of the best lineup makes sense. Jack Miles won the most races last season and became the vice champion. He ended up scoring 3 wins and only lost the championship to AlphaTauri driver Scyther. Our worst pairing, I'm going to tell you right now. I'm giving it to the Ferrari Academy as a whole. This is really disappointing from the Ferrari Academy to have a Ferrari car, a Haas car, and an Alfa Romeo car as an academy as a whole have 3 out of 6 drivers occupied with those lineups. That is really disappointing. And from Ferrari Academy, not too long ago, to start Season 10 F1, we're only halfway through that season. And guess what? They started off the season having a crap ton of reserves, and now they only can fill 3 of the 6 Formula Endurance seats. That makes no sense. So, Ferrari have Yano, which is really good. Alistair Alfa Romeo, which is decent. But GSR Veered, who has finished not so great, has had the most penalties in terms of track limits in his races that he's done in the Haas. I really think this is disappointing from the Ferrari in terms of their effort. Alright, so champions. Realistically, it should be HSR Gecko for Red Bull winning it. I don't see any other way it's anyone else. Jack Miles can do really well for McLaren. I see that being a possibility in him taking the Drivers' Championship, but I think it's going to be HSR Gecko for Red Bull, getting redemption from the way he started last season. He was really strong and was going toe-to-toe with Scyther, and then 3 DNFs in a row just ruined that. And being in the Red Bull, we saw what happened last week in Japan. He got pole position, had really good pace, and then fell back. This time he can't be falling back. He can't. He said it feels better than the Ferrari, so let's prove it this season. I think he's the Drivers' Champion. As for our Constructors' Champion, I'm going to go a second straight season for McLaren. Their best driver pairing with Jack and Hunted is for a reason. It does not come without surprise that it'd be those guys. Ferrari and Red Bull still need to fill up their second seats, so a lot can definitely change, and my opinions can definitely change, but the fact of the matter is that McLaren have a full lineup, and in terms of the full lineups, there's only 4 of them, and McLaren have the best one. So let's go over something quickly in terms of F1 Tier 1 here now. F1 Tier 1 expects to see 2 races dropped. I just asked Luke about 10 minutes ago, Luke Range, the tier coordinator and the league owner. He has no clue what those tracks will be. However, Round 22, which will be ran, will be our 200th Tier 1 RPL race. That could either consist of a race like Las Vegas, China, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, or Texas. Any one of those 5 tracks will be our 200th Tier 1 event in RPL. Well, 200th race. There's been 200 events as of round 20. Because remember, Saudi Arabia and Spain got canceled 2 times prior. So, yeah, we shall see what happens for our events in RPL Tier 1 in terms of what tracks get removed. Originally, it was going to be a 26 race calendar. Now it will be a 24. And there will be still this calendar consisting of the most RPL races in a single season, 24. But I expect Brazil to stay as the finale. I don't see any other reason why it would change. That's probably the one that would be most secure because these guys work so hard, Luke, Jack, and Owen, to put Brazil as the finale rather than Abu Dhabi this time. So I really wonder what will happen in terms of our calendar. A lot of drivers have said they think Zandvoort is one that does not create a lot of passing. Singapore, Portugal, maybe Las Vegas, maybe China, maybe Qatar. Those are some tracks that some of the drivers have vocalized, but we'll see what Luke ends up deciding because he said himself he has no clue as to the current moment what tracks will be removed of the two. In terms of our lineups, a lot has changed though, and I'll tell you right now, Williams is the only team not to have 2 full-time drivers. AlphaTauri have an opening spot, and I suggested that TSR Cryptic should return to that because he did really good reserving in Canada. Florian dropped his full-time seat. A lot has changed since the start of the season, but the only team that really has kept it consistent with a driver since the start of the season. You could argue TB being Mercedes still, Cookie being Red Bull still, Korsman being McLaren still. I mean, those are really the only teams that have had the same driver pairing or driver lineup since the start of the season. TB and Cookie are the only 2 drivers to start every race this season in Season 11 Tier 1. And, the Chillers bounced around a few academies. I could argue the same thing for, really, in a way, Scyther going from McLaren to Ferrari. Big change there when he did that, and now he wants a better car to try to challenge Cookie. It's kind of ironic with that, but I'm rooting for Scyther to try to give us some competition for Tier 1. If you go back to our predictions video at the start of the season, a lot of things have definitely changed in the meantime because it's not the same. With that being said, I predicted Cookie to win about 6 or 7 races and then it to be spread out between the whole field with Korsman and Scyther, but that didn't end up being the case. Cookie's been a lot more impressive than expected, and he deserves the credit for that. There's a lot of records Cookie can be breaking or getting close to very soon. We'll see what ends up happening. Let's go over, lastly, one more thing. Commentary for all of our tiers in RPL for the upcoming seasons. Obviously, we're halfway through Tier 1 in the season. But as for Tier 2 and Formula Endurance, we are making a brand new season come to light where the Tier 2 commentary lineup for Season 12 will consist of Owen and I. Titan and I for Tier 1 still remaining the same. As for Formula Endurance, I don't know what will happen there. A lot can still happen. And I don't know my future with things because I am getting a job here soon, and I don't know how that will conflict of the RPL schedule of mine. But I still plan to help out the league the same way I am right now. Maybe a little less with certain things. I think Tier 2 race highlights will be something that will not be going forward, but we'll keep it with Tier 1. We'll keep it a Tier 1 exclusive thing. We'll still try to give you guys the attention for Tier 2 that you guys deserve to have. And Formula Endurance deserves the same thing as well for them. So we shall see what happens in terms of the tiers fully. I plan to have, if Zatsi ends up getting in, that will for Tier 1 as commentator, that will happen due to Titan and I both missing a Tier 1 race. Usually the backup would be J&T, but I've switched that to Zatsi. I think with what he showed during Formula Endurance, a little bit of seriousness, a little bit of fun, and really good in terms of the camera if we need that. As for Tier 2, a backup, I have no idea what would happen there, but for Formula Endurance, Zatsi's been trusted there. If I were to miss, that he'd be there. Thank you to him and Benz for streaming last week for Formula Endurance. I was not there, and like I said, that may happen again, and I wouldn't be surprised if it does because, like I said, my future is very uncertain in terms of commentating every single tier. I want to stay with Tier 1 for sure. I'd like to stay with Tier 2 as well, but I think because of my schedule, it's going to be tough to choose all tiers. There will be one I may have to give up. I don't know what will happen. it'll be decided in a little bit of time for that, because a job may conflict with that. No surprise in terms of that. Happened to beat Nick already. Either way, folks, enjoy your day, enjoy your week, and tomorrow we will be racing for Tier 2 in Silverstone. F1 will be in Hungary, or not Hungary, we just ran Hungary, oops. F1 will be in Belgium, and Formula Endurance will be in Bahrain for the season opener. We already know who's commentating those events, but we shall see you then, folks. Have a great day, have a great evening or night whenever you're watching this, and we'll see you then for the events in RPL this weekend. And make sure you tune into the YouTube as well for other additional content throughout RPL that you shall enjoy. Till next time, we'll see you then. Bye bye.